Welcome back, welcome back. We did not take a very long break between episodes. I think it was just a few days ago we posted Squonk and Los Indos, but hey, we're moving right into Wind and Wuthering, and I think it's appropriate we didn't take that big of a break because the guys in Genesis didn't take a very big break between A Trick of the Tail and Wind and Wuthering either. So, Jake, how are you this evening?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm good. I'm really stoked to get to this album. You know, we're entering this phase in Genesis history where, you know, the fans start to change a little bit. They start to get really passionate about, you know, what album was their last favorite Genesis album. And as I've kind of built this community on TikTok, there's, you know, this big group that just really thinks this is Genesis's last great album. You and I grew up with them in the 80s, so I actually had to go back in time and to even discover this album. So for me, we've still got a lot of great Genesis albums left to go, but there is something remarkably special about Wind and Wuthering, and I think it's a album that I'm really excited to dissect with you.
Yeah, this is definitely, you know, one of those albums that, well, for me personally, I love it. I think it's a great album.
Me too.
And I can understand the folks who are just like, you know, this is peak Genesis and it doesn't get any better than this. One, it's really the last album with, you know, kind of, you know, minus Peter Gabriel, and we've already talked that one to death. This is Steve Hackett's last album, right? And the band is not going to make a serious effort to replace him. So, you know, they're going to move forward as a three-piece after this. And that it fundamentally changes the nature of the group. So there's a sound argument there, right? Both musically and you know, probably from a power of the band perspective. But for me, you know, we're 80s guys, so that to me the best is yet to come, really. And I think you see a maturation of the band here, right? I mean, it's the same old story. This is the next album, and the band is more mature here. But the point you made about how the band just really jumped straight into the recording of this album is significant, because I don't feel that the material here is fundamentally more mature. What it is, in my opinion, is it's a little bit more rootsy for Genesis, right? I feel like they're coming back to some of the earlier, bigger prog albums. Now, there's a twist here, right? And I think one of the things that gets stuck in Steve Hackett's craw during the production of this album is the idea that that the band is going to move away from some of the Peter Gabriel influenced songwriting aspects, right? I mean, you would have to assume at this point that he was bringing a lot of the kind of ancient mysticism, you know, some of the legendary, you know, the all the snake sex and all of those things that come from ancient Greece and Rome. That those were Peter Gabriel influences, because you know, the band is making a conscious effort here to move in a different direction, to kind of update some of their lyrical material. And Steve Hackett is on record saying, you know, the wackiness is kind of gone from the band. And, you know, that if you listen to his solo album produced, you know, prior to Trick of the Tail, you can kind of understand his mindset at this point, where what he means by wacky.
Yeah, Voyage of the Acolyte, every song is inspired by different tarot cards, right? Definitely some mysticism there, and an attempt at a concept album, a theme. Great album.
It's wild. Takes you on a ride.
Yeah, and I do think that as we go through this album, we're going to get into all the Steve Hackett stuff. I think obviously we kind of have to. What I wanted to do is just kind of set like this moment in time. So they released Trick of the Tail early in 1976. They went on tour. They finished their world tour on Trick of the Tail in July. And, this helped them sort of come out of debt a little bit. Remember how much debt they were in from selling England by the pound and, most notably, Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. And so they're feeling more confident. And to your point about Hackett and Voyage of the Acolyte, Hackett was seeing some success with that album. I think he just barely missed the top 20 in England. And so it was a very successful album for him. He asked the band coming out of the Trick of the Tail tour if they could take a little break and he could release another solo album. And I think the band was feeling so confident that they outvoted him and they said no. So they went to Holland. They packed their bags, went to Holland, and they recorded this album, like free of all distractions. And, Hackett wanted to split the writing credits, 25% each. They basically said no to that as well. Once we cover some of the songs that made the album and talk about some of the songs that didn't make the album, I think, his decision to leave will become even more kind of crystallized. But as we go, we'll also talk about just some of the themes of this album. I think for me personally, it's a great album to put on in the autumn as the weather's starting to turn cold. This is definitely a weather themed album. We'll talk about the Emily Bronte Wuthering Heights references as we get into this album a little bit deeper. But tonight we're going to talk about the two real opening tracks, the 11th Earl of Mar and One for the Vine. We're going to start with 11th Earl of Mar, and I just completely stand both of these songs. They are on constant repeat for me at all times. They help me with my discovery of the rest of the album. 11th Earl of Mar is a Rutherford lyric. I'm excited to get your take on it because you're just super into British Isles history. So I want to hear what you have to say about it. But it was really, the contributions of Steve Hackett and Tony Banks working together on 11th Earl of Mar is very apparent. And then One for the Vine is just, it's the Tony Banks classic. And it's one of the best Tony Banks compositions, I think, that has ever been put on tape. And he spent a year working on it just to get it perfect. And it's one of those songs that he took into the studio and said, guys, here's a song that we're going to play exactly like this. And there's part of me that is really thankful that they did that because I just think it's a great song.
Well, the guy isn't shy, and when it comes to presenting his ideas, and when they're as good as this, who can blame him, right? There's definitely nothing wrong with that. The real challenge here with Tony Banks on this album, I think, I would have to say, is the lack of a counterbalance from Peter Gabriel, right? Yeah. The guy who, at least in my opinion, was keeping him, at bay to a certain extent. If you remember the old quote, it may have been Peter or Steve, one of them, who mentioned how many ideas Tony would try and bring to every album.
Oh yeah.
And that they would only allow a couple of them, to just, again, because nobody else could get a word in edgewise. There are 9 songs on this album. Tony Banks wrote 6 of them. Right. So you definitely have a swing in the Tony direction here. But you get, in the material that we're going to cover tonight, you get right out of the gate, the distinction from the earlier albums. You mentioned the 11th Earl of Mar. This is a weird little song. It's what an incredible intro to an album. And the fella's just keeping the energy super high here, not letting the guard down at all. Just come out swinging. With a song about the 1715 Jacobite Rebellion, right?
Why not? Why not? Let's open the album with that. Why not?
Because it just kicks so much ass. The 11th Earl of Mar, or John Mar, was the Jacobite, or was a supporter of the Jacobite Revolution of 1714, inspired, of course, by the coming to the throne of the House of Hanover, right, with George the First being a Protestant. That kind of upset the Highland Scots, and they decided to revolt. And of course, the 11th Earl of Mar sided with the Jacobites and wound up ultimately dying in exile in mainland Europe, I think somewhere in the Holy Roman Empire, because of, ultimately the failure of that revolution. Classic subject matter. Then, of course, we have One for the Vine, which Tony Banks would equate, I believe, to the Lamia, right? I mean, he's going to say that this was a piece that was intended to be as big as the Lamia was. But he, of course, appreciates it far more because it's not a song about weird snake sex.
Yeah.
But I do feel like this is, maybe if we look at it as the Lamia Part 2 or the Lamia Take 2, that is a fair comparison. This is the one that he really just nailed, right? Hit it right out of the park. If it took him a year to write it, it shows. You should take more time with other songs.
I'm certain he did. As we do this together, I'm learning more and more about pieces of music that they had that were sitting around, for long stretches of time, and like there's a bit on Hackett's Voyage of the Acolyte that Rutherford had been sitting on really since the Foxtrot sessions. So that just kind of blows my mind. So this idea of letting these things kind of evolve over time and get better and find the right moment, I think, is really special.
Yeah, and progressive rock doesn't age on the shelf, right? And this is not a abnormal thing for bands that have deep writing credentials. And of course, this is a band of writers. So it's really no surprise that they would have a very deep backlog of unfinished material. It's actually a kind of an enviable place to be. I know my writing partner and I like to keep a fairly deep backlog of stuff, just ideas, and you come up with stuff, you throw it down, you save it somewhere, and you come back to it, and you never know when it's going to, scratch the itch or tickle you a different way. So, I think that's a kind of a cool thing, right? That you have this deep backlog. It's one of the reasons you could turn an album like this around so quickly, is that it doesn't take a very long time to write it. And when you have the material, you have the ideas, and it's really just a matter of stitching them together.
I want to come back to your comparison of One for the Vine and the Lamia at probably a little bit later as we talk about it in more depth, because I had not made that comparison. But as I'm really thinking about One for the Vine, I can see it. All right, but let's keep going with the 11th Earl of Mar, because I think that the historical story is really compelling. I love the way this track starts, because it's it is a powerhouse track to open the album, but the guitar riff at the very beginning makes it feel like it's just a very natural continuation. And we'll hear that as we listen to it together. And I just wanted to point that out. And then the song ends the same way it starts, which we've come to expect from so many of these classic Genesis songs. But I just love how that very initial intro sounds like a continuation of an album. And in some ways, I just look at A Trick of the Tail and Wind and Wuthering, being released in the span of the same year. These albums of such complexity going really hand in hand together in this Genesis catalog. And then what I really wanted to ask you about is whether you have some thoughts or insights on this running theme through 11th Earl of Mar about Daddy. They keep kind of calling out Daddy, you promised, or Daddy, so there's some Daddy theme there. And I've got a theory about what it means, but I don't know if you had any takes on the Daddy piece that just keeps coming up.
No, I mean, outside of the, I've kind of always played it as the historical aspect, right? That on its face, the Jacobite Rebellion is is like any of the historic British rebellions, one against authority, right? This is a time where it was illegal to be Catholic or to be anything other than, in Scotland, a member of the Church of Scotland, right? And the head of the Church of Scotland was the monarch of Great Britain. And so, this is, we just had the Act of Union. We just had, Scotland ultimately lose its identity to the broader Great Britain, right? So it's an interesting theme to explore. The daddy part, I kind of take that as, I don't know, there's probably some depth there, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, but I've always looked at it as just sort of that, particularly in the Highland Society after the Jacobite Rebellion, as is outlined or discussed, I think, a little bit in the novel that inspired at least parts of this song, The Flight of the Heron, which is set about 30 years after this rebellion in the Highlands of Scotland, where we have the kind of the after effects, or this is what it looks like to live in a society that is under control of a foreign body, right? So what does that look like when you're passing along your own heritage, right? And to your further generations, that sort of thing. I've just kind of played it as that in my head, but what do you think?
I think of a never-ending story. So
okay.
I think it's the kid sitting on a bed with the dad telling them the story of the 11th Earl of Mar, and basically begging the daddy to keep going. Daddy, you promise, you're going to tell me the rest of the story.
Tell me the rest of the story.
I feel like it's bouncing between the actual history and then someone telling this story to their child. And that's been my take on it pretty much since the first time I heard it. But again, it's just a personal kind of feeling that I have. I did Snopes it a little bit, and it doesn't, I'm not the only one with that sentiment.
Yeah, I could see that. This is to some extent a, it's a story of a rebel.
Right.
And that's the kind of thing that you might tell your kids as a bedtime story if you were, down with a rebellion.
Right.
And so that's cool. I could, yeah, I'll buy that.
Well, let's listen to it because we've got a lot still to dissect with it. Let's get it playing, and I'm certain we will do that together. But just listen in this first little bit at how it just Steve Hackett's guitar just kind of comes through as if it was already playing, and it's a continuation of a great work of art.
Here we go, right?
Yeah, once that intro kind of is over with, then we start getting into just what we have come to expect from Genesis openers.
Mm-hmm.
I will say Phil Collins is starting to really find his footing as the orator of these unique stories that Rutherford and Banks like to tell. He seems to be a lot more confident as a lead singer here.
Definitely. Yeah, he's not singing in the style of Peter. He's finding his own voice here. And it's funny. I would have. I don't know why, but I never would have put that just in the context of the song. The "Daddy You Promised" is but I buy it. I buy your interpretation.
Of course, in Never Ending Story, it wasn't the dad, right? It was the grandpa.
That's true. Also, Princess Bride, right? Great,
Princess Bride.
Fred Savage.
Yeah, that's actually what I was thinking of. Yeah, Never Ending Story. He's reading the book, right? I was thinking of Princess Bride.
That's right.
Damn it. Yeah, who knows? I mean, Rutherford was fascinated by the story of this rebellion and how this rebellion fizzled out before they made it to London. And who knows? Maybe his dad told him this story and he just kind of weaved that into the storytelling of this song. But here we just get some great Hackett work. I mean, this is the four of them working together better than anything else we're going to hear.
I would agree with that.
Song structure wise too, I think both songs tonight have an interesting they have this kind of downbeat part, or like right here that we're getting into. We'll see this in One for the Vine as well. And both songs are a little bit about, I mean, they're both tragic. They're both just very sad and tragic. That's a theme that I think carries us all the way through the entire album.
I will say, just as we're listening to the song, I'm kind of looking at the interwebs here, and I found a picture of John Erskine, the 11th Earl of Mar. And in his most famous portrait, he actually has his son, Thomas, in the portrait with him. And John is decked out. I mean, he's wearing royal purple, he's got his dagger, he's got his garters. I mean, he is as lordly as an earl could look. And he's got his hand on Thomas's shoulder, as if to say, someday, son, all of this will be yours, right?
Oh, yeah.
We know that supporting Jacobites is not a way to pass things on to your children, other than doom and sadness.
Well, maybe it's written from Thomas's perspective, the son, right? There was a line in that part, you know.
Yeah, you promised me the earldom of Mar. You jerk. For what it's worth, he's actually the 23rd and 6th Earl of Mar. He's not the 11th. I'm not sure where that comes from.
Maybe it's just more the alliteration of it is better.
Could be. It was a complicated time because he is the 23rd and 6th Earl of Mar and the 1st Duke of Mar.
Again, ending the song the same way we came in. It's funny because as I listen to interviews with Tony Banks talking about Hackett leaving, he indicates that the work that he did on 11th Earl of Mar, you know, should have been satisfying to him to stay in the band for the rest of time. And Banks never really wanted Hackett. I mean, he said he really enjoyed collaborating with Hackett because they were both kind of weird and out there in some of their ideas. Mm-hmm. And the other two were just a little bit more straightforward and linear. And I always think that that's an interesting perspective, but you know, there's no way that with someone like Steve Hackett, like just kind of playing that riff and playing through that opening song are going to be enough to keep him really quiet and happy in his overall contributions to the band, especially when he's dropping solo albums and he's presenting tons of stuff to the band and they're choosing not to use it. So, we'll get into that, especially as we talk about some of the future tracks that made the cut that replaced some of his work that he was presenting.
Yeah, it's a real sticky wicket, right? You got to go where the success is. Being a musician is hard enough. You don't have time to float a whole bunch of favors to other folks. So you can get that sense. On the other side of that same token, his work on this track is fantastic. There's a nice, I would say, an elegant subtlety to it, right? that is really developed over the last couple of albums, where you used to get the super flashy, big solos, lots of finger tapping, lots of the bigger effects. Here we're seeing Steve almost start to sound more like a second solo keyboardist, right? His just affects you broadly and tone have started to migrate in that direction. And, of course, he's doing that with Genesis. You listen to the solo material he's putting out. There's a bit of that in there, but it's far more, avant-garde, I would say, in terms of what he's actually doing. So one could kind of say, one maybe could argue that he's getting bored with some of this Genesis work, right? Yeah. It's just not the same challenge that it once was.
Yeah, I think you're right. So we discovered that maybe my theory on the daddy piece there is right or wrong. It doesn't matter. It's up for interpretation. I think it's our podcast, so we'll say what we want to say about it.
I like it. I like it. And perhaps it's both, right? Perhaps it's
Thomas and someone being read the story like they're in.
Right, and what if the kid who's being read the story is also named Thomas?
I like it. I like it. All right. What an opener. Great tune. I think, we're going to continue to listen for some themes through this entire album. There's certainly, the album is called Wind and Wuthering. There is certainly a theme of weather that stretches through it. It is a colder album. It is a more romantic album as well. There seems to be storytelling that is typically a little bit more tragic as we go through, and that kind of leads us into this Tony Banks masterpiece, One for the Vine. The story here is, and I want to explore the Lamia similarities as I kind of go through this. So just kind of stop me if you see something that's consistent there. But the song begins with a solitary man who's wandering through a frozen landscape. Frozen, right? Cold, wind, withering. Which is ironic because they were recording in Holland in the middle of a summer heat wave. But it is what it is. He encounters a group of people who are searching for guidance and meaning. And they start to see him as this like prophet, Christ-like savior figure. So you can actually kind of tie that back to Rael a little bit, right? The journey that Rael is on through the Lamb. But the irony here is that this guy, this protagonist, doesn't really believe that he's special. And I almost see some parallels here with 11th Earl of Mar as this story unfolds. But he gets kind of swept into this story and starts believing that he is special, and he eventually leads them into this battle and becomes exactly what they believed him to be, even though he never really intended to be that protagonist. But by the end of the song, he's disillusioned and trapped by the very myth that the others kind of created around him. And so to me, it's like this man has become the burden of the expectations that are placed on him. He loses the freedom to simply just be himself. And there's this kind of subtle suggestion from One for the Vine that leaders can become victims of the stories that people tell about them. So I think that's where I kind of romanticize the idea of both of these songs being, very heavily into historical narratives, but also storytelling narratives that generations are kind of raised on.
Yeah, that's insightful. I largely agree with you there. One for the Vine to me is a story of a man who's disenfranchised with, whatever you want to call it. It's an authoritarian mindset, whether it's political or philosophical
Yeah.
or religious, right? I kind of take him as like a messiah figure, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But what's ironic and kind of the source of his disillusion is the idea that he never really believes in this idea of a messiah. But then he's selected as the messiah, right?
Right.
Which further kind of alienates him or isolates him from this idea. So it just intensifies his disillusion. To me, not to jump straight to it, but the comparisons here with the Lamia are just that, right? That we're dealing with a story of isolation.
Right.
We're dealing with a story of loss of innocence, right? Just discovery of maybe a reality of things that doesn't align with the ideal that you'd like to believe in, right? There's obviously some in that messianic comparison. There's some sacrificial transformation going on here, right?
Yeah,
Similar
totally.
to the Lamia. And all of it is kind of culminates in this. Probably a spiritual awakening, but it's a weird spiritual awakening, right? It's kind of hard to say what it is that these protagonists have discovered. In this case, this individual, I think, just falls further into disillusionment. But maybe that's the point of the tale, is that this is the downward spiral. Save the renewal for some other time. But either way, it's a beautifully told story, and the idea musically from Tony Banks is, let me stitch together a piece of music that sounds uniform, right? It sounds like it all fits together, but the reality is he's not repeating any sections of this song, and this is what makes it feel so early Genesis, right? Is that we're kind of back to this whole kind of odd song form. You don't have your traditional verse, chorus, bridge, structure. Here we have 10 or 15 different vignettes that are stitched together into an epic song, an epic piece of music. And that really is what stands out musically.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up if you didn't, but I knew you would, because in all of our earliest episodes, you talked about how Tony Banks was kind of bucking the norm when it came to the song structure. And he sort of got back onto the tracks, over the last couple of albums. But here, with this piece, he has very complex but flowing structure. He's got this constant musical evolution throughout, no obvious chorus. The themes here, maybe a theme is that it's not necessarily a song about a prophet, but it's about kind of the human need for prophets and how we kind of create them. So there's a lot going on here. One thing that I wanted to point out is just, again, I said it during the beginning of 11th Earl of Mar, but Colin's vocal performance here is pretty spectacular. And again, he's just handed lyrics to sing, but he's able to really perform them in a way that does justice to the story. I think we're probably going to hear Colin's falsetto for the first time in this song, as he's bringing in some characters and some spirit to this track. I was tempted to play a live version of this because it really comes to life on stage when they would play One for the Vine live, particularly during the Duke tour in the early 80s. But when I was listening to those, I was watching the videos of those performances today, the audio just wasn't as crisp and clean as we wanted it for this show. So we are going to play the studio version. Let's get into that now. starts with just almost this heartbreaking guitar riff from that repeats itself through the song from Hackett, that just really feels like one of the saddest guitar riffs I can imagine, but at the same time just really helps tell the story throughout and helps the story transition as it goes.
Kind of the counterpoint that Steve Hackett sets there with Tony playing that arpeggiated part on the piano and Steve playing a counter arpeggiation on the guitar. It's brilliant. It's beautiful.
It's totally beautiful. I think, and I get hung up on how similar 11th Earl of Mar is to this song in terms of some of the themes that happen. So in a lot of ways, these two songs blend perfectly together for me, and they almost feel like one piece. I know that they're clearly intended to be very different stories, but they are both about kind of an underdog going to battle.
No, and that's an important point about the production quality here, right? That you do have to kind of look down and see, what track you're on if you're not paying attention, because it just flows together so nicely. And this is the kind of thing that I've, really only given top marks to people like Jackson Browne in the past, right? That construct an album that flows just so perfectly. It is a mark of progressive rock, but nobody does it like Genesis. Here we go with the bass pedals and the ARP pro soloist.
And the falsetto fill.
In the falsetto fill, yes. What a big sound, though. And that acoustic piano, I just love it. It's at the core of this whole little jam that they've got going on.
It was actually this part why I didn't play the live version, because Phil's falsetto gets kind of drowned out by how powerful the band is during that part. Just let me rest for a while. Come on, guys.
And here, great example of the transitions. We're into just a whole new idea.
He walked into a valley all alone. There he talked with water and then with the vine.
These sections also work really well for the live show, because now Phil is able to leave the microphone, walk back to the drum kit, and by this point it was him and Chester. And in the section coming up where Tony Banks goes crazy with just the different sound effects, that reminds me of you and I when we first got electric keyboards. That part, Phil and Chester just go nuts on the drums together.
Here again we have that. Oh boy,
Doesn't it just slice through your heart?
It really does. It's musically, it's a fun little line. I wanted to point out that, and I have to say that this section right here, we're going to hear a lot more of this a decade later on the Invisible Touch album, right?
Yeah.
If you go and listen to that album, you're going to hear almost this exact same section. We'll save that analysis for later. But, the flute, right? The ARP Pro Soloist has a flute sound that Tony Banks employs, I think, in the absence of Peter Gabriel, right?
Yeah.
And we heard it in that section just leading into this. This is so much more disco-y, though, right?
Yeah, your homework is to go watch this live in like 1981 because Phil and Chester on the drums during this part are just putting on a masterclass. It's amazing. And this is one of the only times there's a little lyric coming up here soon, and it's one of the only times that Phil is behind the kit and he pulls the microphone down and sings the line as he's drumming. He's like doing it Don Henley style. Which is unique, and I just love it.
And not to buck the audio engineers out there, it's incredibly difficult to mic a singer who goes from the front of the stage to behind the drum set and have him sound consistent in a live environment. So they have some absolute excellent people working for them.
Falsetto again, behind the kit.
I love the keys here. Just so big.
Travel across the plateau of ice up to its edge. Then they crossed a mountain range and saw the final plain. Still he urged the people on. Then on the distant snow, he observed one without hope. Flee back up the mountainside. He thought he recognized him by his walk and by the way he fell and by the way he stood up.
There, it's understated, but the Mellotron in the background, which I don't know who is still using the Mellotron this heavily in '76. I imagine there's a lot of bands out there still doing it, but it just really checks
Has
a
that
box.
atmosphere. Yeah.
Fills it in. I always get vibes of that, fight scene between Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader at end of the last good Star Wars movie. I'm kidding about that. I don't mean to upset anybody, but no, at the end of Empire, yeah.
You sound like a Genesis fan.
Yeah.
The last good Genesis album. That was the last good Star Wars movie. It's like Who Done It is their version of The Last Jedi.
There you go. I love that part. Gives me chills when he picks up that theme with the acoustic piano and just.
I always feel like that's likely exactly how the song started. Like when he was creating it, it probably started right here.
You know, Extreme, or not Extreme, who is the band that's going to use that down the road?
Faith No More.
Yeah, Faith No More is going to steal that from them a little bit later and have that, whatever that song is from the 90s. It's just going to go out with the acoustic piano.
Oh, right. With the fish flopping around in the
With
video.
fish flopping around, yeah.
Well, I mean, there we have it, Jake. We've got 11th Earl of Mar. We've got One for the Vine. We're well on our way into the next great Genesis album. You know, I think, again, I mean, One for the Vine, it's like inspiring, heartbreaking. You know, it's just a perfect Tony Banks song. You know, I feel like he's kind of building this unofficial trilogy of songs here with Madman Moon and then One for the Vine and then, dare I say, Burning Rope on the next album. So just I think we'll get to pay attention to that as we go through this little journey together. But Wind and Wuthering, there's still a lot to unpack. We've got all the Steve Hackett drama. We've got all the references to Wuthering Heights that I think we need to get into. We've got a track on here that's the first single that they really tried to push in the U.S., which is the third track on the album, which I'm not a huge fan of because our dad was a dentist and we grew up with this song playing constantly in his dentist office, Your Own Special Way. But as I've been going on this journey, I've kind of appreciated Your Own Special Way a little bit more. So we'll talk about that for sure. And then we've got some jazz fusion fun on here with What Gorilla. We've got our crazy storytelling songs with All in a Mouse's Night. We've got some great Steve Hackett and Phil Collins contributions together where we've got Blood on the Rooftops. And then we've got this Afterglow suite kind of towards the end of the album that I think we just need to really unpack. And I can't wait to do it with you.
Yeah, this is going to be a fun one. It's a very heavy album. Lots of really great music here, as we've just heard. So, yeah.
That's right.
It's only up from here.
All right, everybody. Well, thanks for tuning in, and we love to hear from you and your comments and all that. So let us know what we got right, what we got wrong. If you've got a theory on Daddy, let us know what it is, and we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, love to hear.
Until next time.